Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the 2021 Humans to Mars Summit. We are so very grateful for another chance to convene. We are really crossing our fingers that in May of 2022, we might actually all be able to convene together in the same room and be
I
in
hope
person.
so.
But until that time, we've had a splendid day. The next 2 days are going to be equal or even better as we approach Wednesday's launch of Inspiration for our very own board member right there, Dr. Cyan Proctor. If you haven't had a chance to watch the Netflix docu-series, I know I'm like the bad weather person is like, where is it on the green screen?
High pressure
again,
systems coming in from the west.
So we now know the launch window. It won't be any earlier than 8 p.m. Wednesday night. And I know everybody's watching some of that weather that's moving in down south. But what is astounding and wonderful is that our amazing Dr. Cyan Proctor will be the fourth African-American female to go to space, be an astronaut, and she is the pilot of this mission. So very many things to celebrate, and sort of the perfect kind of thing to bat up as we have a great panel tonight on how space exploration can improve and impact and open the doors wide open for inclusivity and diversity. They're also going to talk about STEM and STEAM, which is, all of you guys know, my probably favorite parts. But again, we're very grateful that you're all here, and I'll let Chris thank everybody and introduce this great panel.
Yeah, thank you, Janet, and thank you everybody for coming back. We're going to have a spectacular panel tonight, looking, as Janet mentioned, at diversity and space exploration. It's very rare that you have a chance to start anew and really move society into a new realm of society, really, of civilization. And so how can we assure that everybody takes part in this grand voyage forward? And to lead this panel is an extraordinary woman, Dr. Shawna Pandya. Yeah, looking at her biography, is there anything that Shawna has not done? I mean, Dr. Pandya is a physician, a well-regarded speaker, a martial artist, a citizen scientist, an astronaut candidate for Project Possum and Phenom, and a prime crew aquanaut for Project Poseidon. I mean, she has degrees in honors neuroscience from the University of Alberta, space studies from International Space University, and medicine from the University of Alberta. She's an accomplished speaker. I mentioned that already, but she's also has sought certifications in skydiving, as well as in open water nitrox and rescue diving, scuba diving, and is working towards her pilot's license. She's fluent in multiple languages, and she also has a black belt in Taekwondo. And
I think it's entirely possible to call her astronaut Dr. Pandya. I think it sounds like with everything she's doing, she will someday go to space. At least that's my prediction.
Yeah, of that I have no doubt. It's just a matter of time. In the next 2 or 3 years, I'm sure we can attribute her with the actual astronaut. We'll be watching her launch sometime in the near future. So, but without further ado, Dr. Shawna Pandya with her panel on diversity in space exploration.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for that warm and wonderful introduction, Chris Carberry, Janet Ivey. Thank you to you, the audience, for joining us today on our wonderful, stellar, some might say, panel ahead on space exploration and how we can expand inclusivity and diversity. With me to discuss this, I have 4 incredible panelists: Dr. Aidyl, Gonzalez, Andrea Yip, Dr. Aaron Persad, Shayla Redmond, and we will get into their incredible bios in just a second here. But today is all about them and their journeys. And so to kick things off, we are going to ask each one of our panelists, after a brief introduction to their amazing work to date, about their journey. So to kick things off, our opening question is, tell us about your journey in the space exploration world, the space sector. Did you find it typical? Did you find it that you were sometimes an outsider? Tell us how you went about your journey, what you're doing now. We're going to go in the order Aidyl, Andrea, Aaron, Shayla. And so let me introduce to you our first panelist, the incredible Dr. Aidyl Gonzalez, doctorate in molecular genetics at the California Institute of Technology, followed by a postdoc on myotonic dystrophy, supported by an $18 million NIH grant with respect to spinal cord injury, a passionate and fervent advocate for all things STEAM and STEM, including co-founder of a not-for-profit called the GOLD Initiative, Gift Over Learning Differences, GOLD Initiative, co-founder of the STEAM-based student-led magazine Mind. She was named 2017 Teacher of the Year in the state of California, a dear colleague and friend from the International Institute for Astronautical Sciences, fellow Possum 13 ambassador. The list goes on and on and on. But rather than tell you for the entire hour about all of my amazing panelists, I would rather turn it over to them. So Aidyl, over to you. Tell us about your journey and how you got to where you are and what you encountered during. You've got 5 minutes.
All right, so thank you for that wonderful introduction. It's a pleasure to be here with these wonderful individuals. So my path is untraditional. Grew up in the South Bronx, Puerto Rican, first generation to graduate high school and college. My parents came to the country from Puerto Rico. And there were three things that basically drove me to this field. And it was a cockroach, Star Trek, and the Cosby Show. Where I grew up, I was fortunate enough to be in Catholic school. Both of my parents worked, and there was only expectations of us to not be pregnant by the end of 8th grade, and hopefully we'd be okay after high school if we graduated. And it started with a cockroach. When I was younger, there was a cockroach who laid eggs, and that inspired me because I told my mom, hey, I actually hatched it. And I was curious of why these egg sacs emerged, young little cockroaches, and they transitioned from white to brown once they had the oxygen. Then Star Trek inspired me, thinking, wait, I could do this? When I saw Lieutenant Uhura, Nichelle Nichols, because she looked like my aunt. She was multilingual. She knew how to fight. She was a scientist. And I'm like, that could be me. But I never knew I could go to college until I saw the Cosby Show, believe it or not. It was Tony Orlando, Puerto Rican. And that particular episode said, I went to college. And I'm like, whoa. So I asked if I could go to college. And I was told, maybe it's not for you. But my neighborhood, there was a lot of deaths and a lot of individuals dying. So I didn't want to be that kind of statistic. So I found a way to go to college. And the person who helped me, who believed in me, was Dr. Eddie Knowles. He was the dean at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. And I was talking to him. He actually visited my high school, and I told him my passions. He looked at my grades. He looked at what I was saying and he actually told me, you know what, you're the real deal. I'm going to take a chance on you. And that blew my mind. From then I entered RPI. So this is a long journey. I'm almost done, I swear. I didn't know I had a learning difference, and I was just failing everything. I was doing cheerleading. I was doing a couple of jobs, and I was failing everything. And I was studying 24/7. And if it wasn't for my boyfriend, now husband now, who realized I had a learning difference, I was diagnosed from a 1.8 to a 4.0, got full ride to go to Caltech. After I graduated cum laude, went to Caltech, graduated there, started my postdoc at the Institute of Genetic Medicine, studying myotonic dystrophy, opened up my lab at Cal Poly Pomona. And then I realized I had an opportunity to become a scientist. I mean, I am a scientist, but also an astronaut. And having the worms that I studied, the possibility for space, that is where my journey began. And now I'm so much closer because I'm able to perform research, inspire younger students, because I'm also an educator. And I'm working with a wonderful organization, IIAS, and Project Possum. So what an opportunity to have civilians pursue science and use space, microgravity, as a tool to aid humankind and our Earth.
Wow, Aidyl. I asked for an opening statement, but I didn't expect that to get so emotionally invested in that. What a powerful journey, and I learned so much about you. Now I'm going to switch it over to Andrea Yip, fellow Canadian, CEO and founder of Luna Design and Innovation, a Canadian startup focusing on biotech and pharmaceutical companies planning missions to space. Luna's goal is to advance health and humanity so people can lead full, healthy, and purposeful lives on space, in space and on Earth. Luna, and I know this from personal experience through collaboration with Andrea, Luna is a channel partner for Blue Origin's new Shepard suborbital reusable vehicle, focusing on Canadian payloads, global biotech, and pharma. And Andrea didn't start out wanting to go into a startup. She is a biologist, design strategist, and public health practitioner with experience in both the public and private sectors. To tell us more about her journey and how she got here, Andrea, please take it away.
Sure. Thank you so much, Shawna. It's a delight to be on this panel. I love the conversation so far. So just a bit about me. I always have to credit my great-grandmother for getting me excited and interested in space, because I grew up with her and she did not speak English in the household, but I watched TV with her all the time, like Canadian TV shows. And I remember she would love shows that were so visually stimulating. So she would love watching the Worldwide Wrestling Federation. That was like her #1 show. But #2 was Star Trek, actually. So a connection to Aidyl. And I think just watching those shows with her just got me so delighted. I didn't understand what was happening. I was a bit young at the time, but I think the visual journey and the stories that they told through being on different planets, being in different worlds, just captivated me. And I remember that as a very early memory of space. But it took me a while to actually start working in the industry itself. And so I would say that I had a very atraditional path into the space industry. As Shawna mentioned, I have a background in biology and public health. I started out my career doing a lot of sexual health education, doing co-creation and design thinking, all these fancy buzzwords to mean I was working on the ground with folks to design products and services that were meaningful for their health and well-being. And that sort of design thread led me into working in pharma. So I did that for several years in New York. And then while I was there, I started to just explore more widely around the innovation space. And I started to have conversations with folks around, I heard about this space research stuff, like this is so interesting, like why aren't we doing more of this? And some people thought I was just totally out there with some of those ideas, but there were some people who were like, yeah, this is interesting, like why aren't these worlds merging together? And at that time, I started to notice that the industry was just changing. It was opening up in a way that I hadn't seen before. And that got me really excited because I saw space companies trying to, engage new audiences. They were trying to start to sell tickets to space to people like you and me. And I thought that was just so interesting and exciting because now suddenly it's not just a captivated space audience that they were really trying to target. It was a broader audience. And so I basically took my design chops and created an experience map detailing what a future commercial astronaut experience would look like. And I shared it with all the space companies that I was really excited about. And they started talking to me, and that got me a start. I started to work with Virgin Galactic on their future astronaut experience and started this partnership with Blue Origin. And so that was just my entry point, but it's probably not the most traditional one.
Thank you so much. So from molecular genetics to commercial space and design, all the way now to fluid thermodynamics. So it is my pleasure to invite Aaron to talk about his journey in the space industry. So by way of background, Dr. Aaron Persad, another fellow Canadian, BSc from University of Toronto in biomedical, the biomedical stream of engineering science. He has previously launched 2 payloads to the ISS. He has received his PhD in, ready for this, statistical thermodynamics and quantum mechanics, try saying that 3 times fast, from the U of T, and is currently a research scientist in mechanical engineering at MIT, where he's developing nanotechnologies for purification, dialysis, treatment, and fusion reactors. And as if that were not enough, he is a fellow director of Bioastronautics over at the International Institute for Astronautical Sciences, IIAS. He is a board member for the Association of Spaceflight Professionals, as well as co-founder of Astreas. So Aaron, tell us how you got to where you are. Take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Shawna. So I grew up in Trinidad and Tobago, and I can't think of a more non-conventional start to the space sector than that little island of a country in the Caribbean. When I was about 4 years old, my family moved to Montreal, and I was suddenly immersed in a new language, from Trinidad, which is English, to Montreal, which is French, and having to learn how to communicate and make friends was a real challenge. And the way that I found to do that was through video games. The NES system had come out around that time. And so I spent a lot of time with video games as opposed to studying and so on. So my grades were not all that stellar. And then when my family moved back to Trinidad, my grades were so bad that I was put back 2 grades in Trinidad. And then something, I guess, happened there where I didn't like the idea of being put back 2 grades. And so I worked really hard while in Trinidad. Within 10 months, I was able to advance 2 grades. So in case you're curious, it's grade 3, 4, and 5. I advanced 2 grades in those 10 months. And there was something in there that really resonated with me. But to answer your question of why space, well, my sister was always taller than I was, and nothing I could do could get me taller. And then one day I realized from watching the news that astronauts actually grow like 2 inches taller when they're in space. And that is the reason why I decided to pursue this avenue to become an astronaut. So my grades, when I moved back from Trinidad to Toronto, having worked so hard, I actually was way ahead of my Toronto class. And that really set me up to go into high school, the IB program. And what I realized about myself is I'm attracted to things that are challenging. So I signed up for the IB program because it was the most challenging program I could take in high school. And then going to university, I signed up for the engineering science program because it was the most challenging program I could take at the University of Toronto, hands down. And I think all of that experience sort of showed me that about myself, I love a challenge. And if someone presents to me a problem where there's a solution, you just got to do it, I'm not interested. But if someone presents me a challenge and there isn't a way forward, especially if they say this is an impossible problem to solve, that's what I want to work on. That's what I want to do. And that's the reason I went into the field of quantum physics and statistical thermodynamics and so on, was because I was told there's no way you'd be able to develop theories and models and experiments along those lines. So to tie this back to how I got to where I am today, during my undergrad, during the engineering science program, I had to take an internship in my 3rd year. And my grades in that program, it being so difficult, had actually dropped. And all of my colleagues and friends were being placed in all of these awesome jobs. And I'm applying for these jobs, but compared to my friends and colleagues, I wasn't the brightest bulb, so to speak, and I never got a position. But very near the end of the internship hiring period, the Canadian Space Agency put out an application, and they were looking for someone to manage their flight campaign. And because my friends had been gotten job offers before, there weren't many people left to apply for that job. And on top of that, you had to be bilingual in French. And I had grown up in Montreal, So I knew French, and that was sort of the big break, if you will. I ended up getting a job working at the Canadian Space Agency, and that sort of catapulted me. It didn't just open a door, it like shot me through my career, opening a lot of doors in the space sector. And now I'm involved in all of these programs that Shawna had mentioned.
That is wild. I didn't know a lot of that about you, Aaron. And also you've pushed me to the conclusion that sibling rivalry is the best motivator in life. So to take us home on these amazing opening statements and these amazing journeys throughout the space sector, I have the inimitable Shayla Redmond, American. She is currently an engineer at the Mercer Research Center in Georgia. She works on various aerospace contracts in support of sustainment and innovation. She received her BSc in Aerospace Engineering and Physics from Tuskegee University, as well as a Master's in Science degree Systems Engineering with a concentration in Space Systems from the Air Force Institute of Technology. Her thesis, if you're ready for this, was based on the effects of subauroral polarization streams of radar operations. And she is an all-around rock star, director of education at IIAS, former POSM 13 ambassador. She is the founder of the not-for-profit STEAM Unlimited, focusing on sciences and arts and promoting these to grade school all the way up to the professional level, as well as opportunities in movies, fashion, and music to present these opportunities to underrepresented groups. So Shayla, tell us about how you ended up where you started.
Well, you told my story, man, I tell you, it's kind of like what Aaron, the funny thing is, I'm trying to figure out what I wanted to do in life. Let's fast forward to high school, and I'm about to graduate, and I'm like, what am I going to major in? I like to explore. I wanted to be an astronomer, then I wanted to be a tomb raider, then I wanted to discover the deep oceans, and then I wanted to find dinosaur bones. So I was like, I have to explore. And I'm like, oh, the planet has a lot to explore, and deep seas have to, but there's enough in space. There's enough space in space. So I was like, what's out there? I want to see what's out there and what things can be discovered out there. That was the first inclination or itch to be like, oh, I'm interested to see where this can go. So that helped get me to my degree as aerospace engineering, and then I double majored in physics because I did a quantum physics class, and I was like, man, Schrodinger's cat, that's very interesting, and kind of going just the unknown and the theoretical aspect of it. So I really enjoyed that, and it got deeper, my love for what can be done in space, as far as experiments in space and how energy reacts in space, and all that stuff was very interesting to me. And then, of course, what I didn't put in my bio, because we had to keep it short, I was in the Air Force for 7 years, and now I am a reservist, so I'm part-time military, but I'm full-time engineer, and I'm enjoying myself as an engineer. I get to do the modeling, the CAD, and all that, and eventually will be in the aspect of hopefully applying that to space. And of course, I have what else I didn't put in the bio, because I have 3 kids. I have a 1-year-old, I have a 6-year-old. Oh, I have a 1-year-old, a 4-year-old, about to be 7-year-old. So my life is a lot of stuff is happening at once, and I'm trying to manage it all. But yeah, space is something I love, and I want to continue to expand upon it. So, yeah.
Okay, so my favorite takeaway from that is Shayla Redmond, Tomb Raider. I am slightly disappointed that does not come out to play, but between all of these careers you explored, it just seems like you were always an explorer at heart, which is fantastic. And the fact that you do all of this, not-for-profit founder, mom of 3, IIAS director, engineer, reservist, like how do you say? So I want to get to some of the questions that we've kind of alluded to during all of your opening statements. And one of them, you've kind of, a lot of the common theme that came out was, oh, maybe space wasn't for me. I didn't have the grades. I didn't belong there. So when we look at the state of the space industry today, how has that changed? Like, are we where we want to be when in terms of being more inclusive when it comes to representation of disciplines and demographics? And if not, like how are we changing? Are we changing fast enough? And if we're not there, how do we facilitate that change?
Yep.
Who wants to take that one first?
Well, I'll start off with just an observation. I don't know if you saw the, I'm sure everyone here has seen this, the European Space Agency's call for astronauts that happened a few months ago. And one of the things that really struck out to me, this is a government agency, was they had a call for people that had disabilities. And I think that represents a shift in thinking, at least for one agency, in how to make space accessible to people who are not necessarily coming from top of the line, Top Gun backgrounds. And I think that opportunity has come about because of the realization that you can have some very good people suited for space, microgravity, to do science, or to communicate just the passion of space and the art behind it, who may not necessarily need to be like a well-trained fighter pilot, so to speak. So I thought that was a really great move on ESA's part.
Absolutely. We're seeing so many new initiatives like that, as well as the Astreas campaign, for those of you who are following along. Aidyl, you looked like you had some thoughts to chime in.
Yes, I think it is. You see that shift of inclusivity for all. And I just wanted to add one more thing to it, that now scientists can be astronauts and really move technology forward and their research forward. But at the same time, I do see the have and have nots. If you're not in the science field, you can actually pay to go to space. And I'm still struggling with that because as a scientist, as we all are interested to go to space, to do our research, we have to struggle in fighting grants and funding. But if someone who's not in the background, just to say, hey, I went to space, that is it still accessible in that respect?
That's a great question that I want to come back to. Before we move on to the next question, maybe Shayla, then Andrea, if you have any thoughts to contribute on this, how we're doing with respect to representation, whether it's discipline or demographics or gender. I would love to hear your thoughts.
I think I'll go ahead, Andrea. Sorry. I think the way I view this is you can only do as much as your where you are. Where are you as far as in the community? So for me, I can look at organizations and I can look at government. I can look at things and say what they're not doing and what could be done better. For me, that's not a lot of useful energy for my strengths. So I'm a teacher naturally. So I can just that's why I founded STEAM Unlimited, and I go to schools and I do science demonstrations. I make science videos. I have stopped because again, I need to manage my 1-year-old when she can, but I plan on getting back into that. I plan on getting back into making videos, talking about hard topics, talking about quantum physics and talking about, space exploration, quantum computing, CAD systems, finite element analysis, all this stuff you don't hear in our day-to-day conversations. And it should be, if we want to make it more accessible, we have to make the language more accessible by putting it out there where it can be accessible. So right now, I'm where I'm planted. I just operate where I'm planted. So I think if you are doing what you're supposed to do, then it's gonna, we will work together as a team as we connect, but it's getting there.
Yeah, that's a critical point about language that you bring up, because I think as a whole, major conferences are doing better of saying uncrewed instead of unmanned, for example, but I'm still seeing folks slip up on it. But the positive and encouraging thing is I'm seeing fellow panelists or colleagues quick to correct each other. So that's encouraging. So to close us out on this particular question, Andrea, I'd love to hear about how you think we're doing when it comes to representation in the space industry.
Yeah, I think we're at an interesting point of change. So like I mentioned earlier, I think that, the commercial industry is changing. things are opening up for people to try space, whatever that means. Maybe they can send a research experiment, or even fly to space one day. And I think that's really interesting, because then there's this shift into, okay, how do we open this up to new audience, people who haven't dedicated their lives to this, who haven't maybe thought about this before. And I think that's incredibly important, because I know when I started, I got a lot of advice from different people, and oh, you're not technical enough, or you need to go back to school to become an engineer. And I mean, I have a science background, but I didn't necessarily have the right background to a lot of people. But I think it just took finding folks who had similar pathways to me to really empathize and understand where I was coming from too, and understand that no, there actually is a place, and that's drastically changing as more and more folks from different backgrounds become able to and share their talents with this space. And there's just going to be more and more room. So I do see that excitement, but I do see still that pushback. And I would encourage anyone to not necessarily just get discouraged from that, because I think it just takes finding the right conversations and folks to really help propel someone.
And actually, on that note, you've laid out our next question very well, Andrea, and that's about specific hurdles. And we kind of heard many of you intimate and hint at this in your opening statements about education, not having the grades, not making the cut initially. So I want to ask all of you as panelists, what is a specific hurdle that you remember facing as you navigated your path? And do you wish there was a parallel universe version of you who had actually achieved that that specific success? Do you wish that had been there had been more support systemically in place to help you navigate that? So I know I'm making you think. And then also, since Aidyl brought it up, in the next round, I do want to talk about financial hurdles. So just to warn you, I will ask you about that. But maybe specifically on personal hurdles. Aidyl, I'll let you take that, then Shayla, then Andrea, then Aaron.
Definitely the personal hurdles. For me growing up in the inner city and don't have family representation in college, or that higher education was an option, that was a hurdle. And that representation on TV, social media, but back then just TV, was so inspiring, because someone had to think it. From Star Trek to X-Men to all these innovations, someone had to think of this idea and think is a possibility, and possibility could become actions. So that was my hurdle, finding if somebody like me can be one. And once I was able to find it, I'm like, well, then I have to forge my path in order for others to move behind me easier. And I am so grateful that Aaron brought up that individuals with physical challenges still have an opportunity to go to space. Because when I hurt myself many moons back and I couldn't walk, I thought my opportunities were gone. I was fortunate, to regain my ability to walk and do stuff, but I thought I cannot. But just seeing individuals, flying just aircrafts, even though they didn't have their legs, I thought, well, it's just me. Don't put that barrier in my head. I can do. So I'm glad Isa actually said the words, we'll find a way. And that's a cool thing. There's a problem, we figure out an innovative idea to have all to go up.
Yeah, that's incredible. And just, it's thank you for sharing your personal journey, because I can't imagine what it's like not only to carve out a successful journey for yourself within a competitive sector, but also to be pushed down from the start. And we'll get to, how we can remove those barriers in the last part of this talk. But Shayla, do you have any specific hurdles that you want to share that you've experienced throughout your career?
There's one particular one that actually has a positive, at least I look at as a positive way. So in life, I want to go to space, and I was like, I want to be a mom and I want to have kids. And that was a big thing to me. And I want to be a certain type of mom. So the funny thing is, when I joined IIAS and we did some of the acrobatic training and we did some of the classes initially in Florida, I just had my second child and I was nursing. And I was like, I'm going to nurse my baby. I don't care care, I'm going to go to space and do space training, and I'm going to nurse my baby. But how do you do that, right? You have to have a support. I had a great support team. My husband actually came with me so that I could, that is why he came, so that I could nurse. He knows what type of mother I want to be. And that's like the whole person concept. And that's really, that's near and dear to me. So between classes, I would be like, hey, y'all, I got to go and make some milk, or I got to go feed the baby for lunch. And my class never saw them until the end. So they thought I was not telling the truth. They were like, oh, she hired a family. She's not really, she's doing some secret scroll stuff as a joke. But eventually, so at the end, the picture I took when I completed the first course is the baby with me and my husband completing the course, because I felt I was able to complete the course and still provide and be the type of mom I want to be. So for me, that's a challenge. And other moms have kind of told me when I've told this story, they're like, you know, you can have both, but you have to have a support system and kind of communicate that with your team, and which is your family and your friends and everybody. So that's a hurdle, but I think it was successful.
That's epic. And hold on to that thought, because I do want to talk about positive social supports in a little bit. But Andrea, over to you on any particular hurdles that you noted.
Yeah, well, I'll touch on the one I mentioned earlier, which is, you know, not necessarily having that engineering or highly technical background, which I think a lot of people expected me to have. And one of the things as a design strategist that I live by is show, don't tell. And that principle has served me well, because I think when I'm coming from a place of having done a lot of product and service design in more of the creative spaces, being able to translate that skill set over into the space industry, it's really hard to just talk about it. I think it can get really jargony, because then, you know, we're both speaking different languages. And what I found helpful was, you know, starting my own projects and being able to, you know, like I mentioned before, I created that service map and people weren't familiar with the language, but the language didn't matter so much as what I was able to show, and that I could act. Showing that value was way more powerful than being able to just talk about what I was good at or what skills I had. And it helped sort of cross that barrier of not necessarily being that technical person, but showing, hey, this is actually how I can add value, and this is how I can do something a little bit different within the industry or for your company. And so so I think show, don't tell has been a super helpful principle for me.
Yeah, that's fantastic that you had that personal fortitude. And I do want to come back to what institutional supports that you would have liked to see to have made your way easier. But I do want to turn it over to Erin, and maybe you want to expand for more on your childhood experiences, or maybe you want to talk about some other hurdles.
Yeah, I think the more pressing hurdle that I face, it sounds to me like all of you have solved this. It's that there's only 24 hours in a day. And that's often a challenge with trying to balance sort of work and social life and free time, and also training as much as possible for a space flight. I don't have that quite figured out yet, and it's sort of melds into just a 24-hour day or 365-day-a-year schedule, and I sort of sleep where I can fit it in a way. But I'm finding that that's not a sustainable model to work off of. So yeah, that's the challenge, is especially with a lot of us having the attitude of go-getters and problem solvers and world changers and so on and so forth. It's finding that balance. You know, it's called the work-life balance, and it's such an important element to nail down and to get right. And I have to applaud Shayla for you know, giving one example of exactly how that could be done.
Yeah, I've decided that I want Shayla and all the moms in the crowd, Shayla and Aidyl, to be my life coaches after this, because I do not know how you do all this in 24 hours. So Aidyl, you touched on something that some may view as controversial, but it's important to touch upon, and that's the financial hurdles. Because on the one side of the spectrum, you can argue that this is perhaps like the early adopters phase, whether you're talking about Tesla, iPhone, or access to space. Or you may argue that you permanently need a yearly income of 9 figures to be able to access space. And so when we talk about the financial hurdles, like, is this something that we see improving and that we truly are going to increase space in terms of the diversity, the disciplines, or is this a rich man's game? Aidyl, you look like you have an answer to that. Go ahead.
Yes, I am struggling with it because I'm thinking when just air flight, the plane developing, what a wonderful thing. It just took time for everyone to have access to flight. Now, looking that there's civilian, we're so fortunate that is becoming democratized, but yet it comes with a price tag. And for those who have the intentionality for research, for, like in my case, try to find new ways to address Alzheimer's or terrestrializing soil. And I have data from the lab and doing analog work, but yet I can reach that tool, which is microgravity, to see if it's plausible to help individuals who are struggling with dementia, or if we want to colonize other planets, to figure out tools that we have on this planet to terrestrialize the soil and also help our own earthly soil. And having someone who has finances and not even a background, just saying, oh, I just want to ride, it doesn't make me feel great, because I'm working hard, trying to write grants, but yet someone could just take a spot just for a ride. And it was just just for their interests. And I don't want to sound, boo-hoo, but yet I'm trying to figure out a balance, because I like that it's accessibility, but yet the intentions for space exploration was to better humankind. And that's where my struggle comes in.
And to play the flip side of that, what if this is just the beginning of that exponential curve? What if in 5 years' time we see 4- and 5-figure flights prices for seats? Does anyone have any other opinions they want to add to the financial accessibility of space? Even it doesn't have to be human tended. We know that payloads are very expensive. Andrea, you and I know this firsthand. Aaron, you definitely know that. Any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, I'll echo sort of Shawna, yours and Aidyl's comments. I think, we're at the forefront, cutting edge. There is a high risk associated with what's being done. And I'm actually grateful that people are willing to pony up the cash to make this happen. It's not really necessarily the scientists or the engineers at the start that have, I understand that there's the passion and the will there. But sometimes it's just the person who's looking for the next thrill. I'm not saying everyone who's flying now, that's the reason, but I have to step back and say, if they were not there, where would we be? And I don't think any of these vehicles would be flying. And so I can appreciate that we're at the start of that price point, and there's going to be a little fight between the market and the demand. You might see that spike go up, but eventually the tourists will have flown, if you will. The personal flyers will have gotten their personal flights, and they'll be looking for the next great thing. And there'll be this opportunity of these space vehicles that they have helped get to fly now available for the science and research. And my hope is that we will see the prices come down and it will be more accessible. And I think we'll see prices come down to the lowest they have ever been for space flight. So that's the hope I have, looking at maybe a longer term of where this could go.
So thank you for that insight, Aaron. So this is the part of the panel where I start inviting audience questions and comments. And while I start looking through those, I want to take us, looking forward to the future, because I feel like we're at this inflection point of saying, yeah, we all recognize that we need to do better. So I know that a lot of you are passionate about this. So I want to ask you the why. why is diversity, representation, inclusivity, why is that important for space exploration? And then I know many of you are taking this to heart and working on personal initiatives. So what initiatives are you working on personally? So let's mix it up. Let's go Shayla, Erin, Aidyl, Andrea.
So, the history has told us from, diverse groups of people give you diverse outcomes and diverse thinking. And with that, you have other forms of innovation, you have possibilities. I mean, my background, again, I went to Tuskegee University. We learned a lot about the Tuskegee Airmen and about the diverse talents that were eventually allowed to participate in different aspects of the world and how well they did. So that's kind of like the legacy, the background of just opening up more room for more opportunities to find new things. And I think same, not just race, obviously ability, able and able people, disabled, however you see it. I think that allows for innovation to accommodate for different backgrounds, I think. And so I think diversity is important for that reason. Everybody should have an opportunity. Eventually, we're going to have, but I think animals, we all want to bring our pets for tourism, right? For adventure tourism, and, take them with us as we go to the moon and Mars. So I think that also opens up opportunity to be innovative.
As an aside, I do spend some time when we talk about true inclusivity. What does the first zoo in space look like? I'll let you think about that. But on to, I think I said it was Erin, Aidyl, Andrea next. So Erin, go ahead.
Yeah, when I think about inclusiveness, aside from what I had mentioned before, the disabilities that people may have, I think of age. So I would love to see younger people go into space. I feel like there's a tremendous impact that could have on just one young person being able to communicate what that was like. And certainly we saw, I think, the youngest person to fly so far on the Blue Origin flight that happened in July. So that's one, the age group. And the second one is just alluding to sort of Andrea's story of different backgrounds, educational backgrounds, or training and so on. I would love to see what an artist could communicate, a poet, a painter, a sculptor, having been to space. And I say that because I have some really talented artistic friends, and they have shown me their ideas for sculptures to convey what it's like to feel microgravity. And I was blown away because having flown in parabolic flights, looking at that sculpture, I can feel it in me. And I think you need an artist to convey that message.
Yeah, that's perfect. And that kind of alludes to some of the comments that are coming from the audience, which we'll get to. But Aidyl, I want to hear from you about where we are with respect to, or why it's important to have that diversity and inclusion and where we need to go next.
Thanks. That just brought up Lou. So I read a lot. So Lou Hung and Scott Page, they published at the National Academy of Sciences, and they actually wrote this particular statement: group of diverse problem solvers, whatever the diversity may be, can outperform groups of high ability problem solvers. And that's the key. You need different thoughts, different cultures coming together with a common interest, solving a problem. And that's where innovation develops. This is where we can actually see each other as humans, as equals, and say, hey, I love your culture. I never thought that we could do this for X, Y, or Z. Let's figure it out and let's go forward. Even Scott Kelly in Endurance spoke that at the ISS, when you had different cultures together, the innovations, the problem solvings, the fun that resulted. And just by hearing that is incredible. And I want to leave this quote from Mae Jemison The fact is that space and its resources belong to us, not to one particular group. So having the ability to work together and we depend on each other for life, and to propagate us as a species, that's why we need the diversity. I mean, even in genetics, hybrid vigor, right? I mean, that's, there we go.
Aidyl came armed with the research and the data. I love it, like a true scientist. Just as an aside for the audience out there, so you've seen me moderate before, you've heard me say this before, one of the best parts about the Human to Mars Summit is how active the green room chat is. So if you see me smiling inappropriately, it's not because I have no idea what proper social norms are, it's because these panelists are so witty. Andrea, over to you before we turn it over to audience questions.
Sure. I agree. The chat is great. You know, I would echo a lot of what's been said in the room so far. I think diversity leads to better design. And I think about this from a design perspective. You know, human-centered design really values having diverse perspective involved in the creation of the products, the services, the systems that make up our society. And I think it's really visible, and we all have those moments when we've had an experience where we knew, all right, someone sort of missed, you know, my experience in creating this thing or this experience, and there's a gap. And I think it's really important to include folks from all different backgrounds so that they can contribute and co-create and be a part of that. Because, you know, I remember even just trying on glasses and they just didn't fit on my nose bridge. Something as simple as that, because I was like, oh, well, who was this designed for? What kind of face was this designed for? And if, you know, who was involved in that? Did they talk to different types of users? Did they, were they coming from different backgrounds themselves as designers? And I think these are all really important questions because they have such obvious but also subtle implications in our day-to-day experiences.
That's a critical point. We saw that initially on the spacewalk last year. Google's found that their automated hand dryers don't recognize darker colored skin. So, you know, having designers design for people they want to see, you have to select those designers. So I just want to read a series of comments that are coming in along similar lines from the audience. And so this points to the future of what disciplines should be involved in space. So I'm going to read you 3 comments. So Kevin first says he's loving these stories, the ways that we're finding to get people more engaged without being as technical. We need more diversity, though, in the technical ranks. So the first question is, what are your ideas to increase diversity within the technical ranks? Trinidad says, thank you for sharing your stories as well. Do you see the space industry as being more inclusive of people switching from other industries? So there's a diversity in industry question. And then Adrian, hopefully I'm pronouncing your name right, says, from your stories, it seems that space exploration has progressed past our views of calculating trajectories and mechanical engineering. Gone are the days of the pocket calculator and slide rule. So what other opportunities do you foresee opening up for people who felt left out because of that lack of highly technical backgrounds? So the questions seem to be along the similar lines of how do we open up space to diverse demographics, to non-technical fields, and to other industries as a whole? Andrea, we'll start with you, and then we'll go Shayla, Aaron, Aidyl.
Sure. That's such a great question. How do you open it up? It's something that I think about because I work with so many researchers as they're planning research missions, and these are highly involved, very intensive in terms of cost and hardware and software and all that good stuff. And I just wonder, you know, what would it look like if we had space as a service? What would it look like if you could have like a research experiment that was basically off the shelf, like a consumer product that enabled you to just try and send something to space, but not necessarily have to go through years-long processes and get the best expertise in the world to help you build that. And that's not to dilute the science in any way, but I think about, you know, we've been able to do this in other technological areas. AI is much more accessible. It sort of acts behind the scenes in a lot of the tech that we use day to day. You know, what would it mean for space to be that level of accessible? And that gets me really excited because I'm like, wow, what it would mean to like go to the shopping mall and like just buy something that would let me do something in space. Like, wouldn't that be wild? And I think we're getting to that point, but I think as we think about that, then we can consider, well, how do you open up to new markets in a way that's really easy and seamless? What does the Uber of space look like? What does the Airbnb of space? Like, these are all really exciting questions that I get really energized about.
Space as a service. I love that. Shayla, what are your thoughts on, expanding the diversity, whether it's discipline or demographics?
So real quickly touching on the diversity in the technical ranks, I think, again, it goes along with making the technical terms common among the people and people that wouldn't normally, I meet a lot of young people that are like, oh, I would never do math. I don't like math. It's too hard. And I'm like, well, actually, this is what you can do with it. And it's not that scary. So that's something I'm an advocate for. But I really want to touch on, as far as like going into space, which you don't think who would be a part of it, is skincare companies. As I think there was a skincare company that launched something into space recently, right, with NASA. So I actually was in a group with some women. They were talking about skincare products, and I posed the question to say, what skincare products can we have in space if we're going to be there more often, because it's very dry, what's moisturizing but also not messy, doesn't get everywhere. So it just opened up this slew of people that was like, oh, this sounds interesting. How do I look deeper? How do I get involved? How do I write grants to send to NASA to say, hey, I have the resources to help you out to get more people in space, Virgin Galactic, Blue Origin. So I like makeup. I also am an engineer, and it's kind of like connecting the two. I like movies. I like, cartoons and all that. And I want to use different mediums to teach, and skincare is a medium to teach, but it's also an avenue for another industry to open up in space. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah, you're right. You're very right. Estee Lauder sent up a product up to space, I think, in the last year. And, that's a great question. We know that when we do skin peels and exfoliants, they work here great in 1G, but if you can imagine how crumbly that would be in 0G, that would be quite the disaster. Erin, what are your thoughts on increasing the technical industry and demographic diversity in the space sector?
Yeah, I think it does come to giving people the opportunity. So when I look at how, let's say, a technical person accesses space, like Aidyl says, it's very, very competitive. So I think one of the challenges that we face is, how can we create opportunities that are specifically geared for, if you will, these non-traditional careers or students or people that are interested to apply and be involved. And maybe the answer is sort of what Andrea alluded to, which is to maybe have like an off-the-shelf, already made solution that they can sort of start with and work with. But I think, and the approach that we've taken with the IIAS is definitely helping on the education side. So we have, for example, the Possible 13 initiative, which is geared toward getting a high school female-led team from a non-representative space nation, giving them the opportunity to think about what would they do if they had access to space. And in order to answer that question, they have to understand what access to space means. Like, what is the microgravity environment? Why do people care about, doing experiments there and so on? So I think, to me, education is the key. And we need to take the time to make sure that we bring those people into the fold, as opposed to thinking of them as an afterthought, so to speak. And that's one of the things I love about IIAS, is it's at the forefront. It's how can we be as inclusive as possible. Yeah.
Brilliant. And Aidyl, over to you.
So I have two aspects. For increasing diversity now, this is where we need advocacy. Those who have the privilege really advocate for more representation. Now, for the educational component, I'm also a high school teacher, and I look at all these textbooks and I look at the curriculum, how siloed and how biased. So one component in STEP education, at least in the United States, is the multiculturalism within STEM. And I'm going to expand it to within STEAM, to have the heart and the arts and the social justice behind it. And one that I've been doing for several years is educating educators, administrators, researchers in in high research universities of cultural sensitivity. In the textbooks, Alice Ball, her work, and all the hidden figures behind it. Why do we only hear Linus Pauling? Why not someone else? Why not speak about all the other individuals who are underrepresented but did the innovations, but they were quieted? So this is an initiative that educators and researchers need to speak of and saying, yes, all these discoveries were based upon all these individuals. And by that representation that, yes, it has been done, there was a Puerto Rican, there was a Trinidad, there is, that's where we could increase the diversity and the voice to be heard. And it's not going to be underrepresented, it's just the norm. And that's our goal.
Thank you so much. I suspect that we could probably go on for another 2 hours, but sadly that brings us to the end of our session already. But we've heard so many good thoughts about how we're just getting started when we're opening up what representation in space looks like and how that brings more perspectives, more possible solutions to the table, and more inspiration, whether we're talking about new avenues for research, new avenues for manufacturing, new avenues for inspiration. And so we've also identified some of the ongoing hurdles, especially for underrepresented groups, but also the value of support. So this has been a tremendous discussion here. I thank you. The audience thanks you. And those in the audience who want to connect with our fantastic panelists online, you can find Shayla at ShayRedStar and at Steam Unlimited on Instagram. You can find Andrea at Andrea Elyip on Twitter. You can find Erin by just using the hashtag #GetAstreas on Twitter, and then Dr. Aidyl Gonzalez at real_Dr._G on Instagram. This was fantastic. Let this be but the start of an important conversation. Thank you all for joining today.
Thank you so much. What an inspiring panel to finish off day one of the 2021 Humans to Mars Summit. We hope you'll join us tomorrow. We're starting at 9:50 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Tomorrow we have a great panel or great session tomorrow with a panel called Building a Space Workforce. Basically a panel of pre and young professionals talking about their journey into STEM education and space exploration, followed by a conversation with NASA Administrator Bill Nelson, facilitated by our own Janet Ivey, followed by another panel called 3D Printing and Sustainability, looking at how 3D printing really enables sustainability on Mars, whether it be for building products or making food or all sorts of other applications as well. In the afternoon, we have a panel called Designing Living Space on Mars. Essentially, how we will literally design living space. How habitats on Mars will help facilitate basically privacy, and how we will actually live with small groups of people on the surface of Mars and growing groups of people on Mars. We'll also have a session called Nuclear Propulsion and Surface Power, and then we'll round out the day with a panel called A Trajectory to Mars, Advantages and Challenges of Long and Short Stay Missions to Mars. Very important panel. I hope you'll stay around for that. And so Thank you once again for tuning in to the 2021 Humans to Mars Summit. We'll see you again tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you very much.